Today's readings invite us to reflect on human suffering, the call to serve, and the healing power of Christ. In the book of Job, we encounter the deep anguish and the lamentation of Job. He eloquently expresses the fleeting nature of human life. Job's words resonate with, I think, the reality of many of our own struggles. He reminds us that life is fragile, that it's filled with challenges, and yet even in the midst of human suffering, in the midst of his own suffering, Job maintains his faith and trust in God. In fact, in the book of Job, we encounter just that, a profound exploration of human suffering, a search for meaning in the face of what in that story is literally senseless trials. Job, a righteous and upright man, experiences unimaginable loss and affliction. Yet he refuses to curse God or abandon his faith. Job's suffering is not just physical. It's not just mental. It's all of it. He loses so much. He grapples with what becomes for us the age-old question of why good people suffer. Theologians call it theodicy, but Job's story teaches us that it's a very real and practical problem. In the face of such a big word, it can feel distant, but it's here. It's present with us. Have you ever felt the sort of anguish that makes you question God? I believe most, if not all of us, have. In thinking about this sort of pain, I felt led to share a story, a very real story of someone I encountered in my time as a hospice chaplain. For sake of privacy, I'll call him Ben. When I met Ben, he was under the nurturing care of his wife, whom he had only been married to for less than a year. You see, when they got married, they found out very shortly afterwards that he had terminal cancer. His wife, a devout Christian, believed showing love to him was the best form of evangelism because for her it was important that he saw the love of God, even if he did not identify himself as Christian. Ben had never been a church person. He was marginalized by preachers, focused more on fire and brimstone than service and action when he was a child. But now I sat in his living room answering questions about Christian belief and the way that Jesus' love manifests in individual lives. Picturing this is important because you see it goes on for several visits. We're all just sitting in a living room. It's nothing as profound as seeing Jesus healing the sick or casting out demons. It's sitting in a room with two people struggling with pain and talking about that pain. As I would arrive, the air would have that medical quality to it. You know it. From ointments for pain to tube feed for nourishment. I could sense things were getting worse for Ben. And I think he knew that too. Though he hid it from his wife, his questions got more poignant and his timeline for his first communion was moved up. Ben was suffering. He was falling more. He found himself bedbound and had increasing pain, but he was making meaning from his suffering. In fact, at the next visit following him being permanently bedbound, he said, let's go ahead and make that communion visit your next visit. After talking after having deep conversations with him, it became clear that he had an interest in taking communion, in making what he envisioned a profession of faith might look like. I taught him more about the significance of communion at that visit, but he taught me more about the profoundness of communion at that visit. We talked about sacrifice and commitment, joy and pain, and he made his first communion on my next visit. As I had a full mass right in his living room, right in front of the television, one thing was clear. Ben and his wife's tears were both joyful and sorrowful. That medical quality to the air tied to a sorrowful reality was not gone, but it had been changed. It had been changed by the wine, the chalice, the communion book, the bread, and the peace we shared with one another. Something was different. Exactly what, I cannot say. I know it's important to us in our own faith journeys to have that moment that everything changes. That moment you hear God's voice. But is it not more profound to see God in action? What I do know is that Ben had made meeting in his suffering. He had seen God at his side in his cancer. It didn't mean that his cancer was a product of God, but that God very clearly was working within him and within his suffering. Comforting Ben and his wife was all God desired. Converting Ben's heart to forgive those that had hurt him was the true conversion. You see, he didn't reject Christianity because he had a problem with a doctrine. He didn't reject God because he couldn't understand the difference between transubstantiation and consubstantiation. Ben had rejected the faith because people had hurt him, and he had hurt others, and it was impossible, he thought, to forgive. This remains to this day the most meaningful First Communion I have ever given. It taught me the importance of forgiveness. You see, when we come to this table, we offer for one another peace. What does that really mean? We're making peace. We're forgiving and asking for forgiveness. In the deep depths of despair, there is room for faith and resilience. There's room for love and patience. There's room for kindness. Job's story, Ben's story, reminds us that suffering, however inexplicable, does not define our relationship with God. It's not made so that we have a relationship with God. Instead, these stories are reminders that even amid the darkest moment, God is present. God offers comfort. God offers us strength.